Julie Christie is the winner. I believe the only thing I can say is I want to express my gratitude to everyone involved, especially my beloved John Schlesinger, for this amazing honor. Thank you. The iconic figure of 1960s cinema, Julie Christie, unexpectedly made a comeback in July 23rd, 2024, outside an East London laundromat. She came out with silver at the age of 84 to hair, a pale shirt, a simple red scarf, and an unmade face. No camera flash, no red carpet, no bodyguards, just a typical moment. However, it stunned the world at once. Because Time declared 1965 because of that humble woman, Julie Christie's year. She and Darling share an Oscar, and she played the immortal Lara in Dr. Zago Shiny Pants. On the Oscar stage, she sewed herself to challenge Hollywood. At one point, she made Warren crazy to wish to wed her, a real legend who once declined to be a Bond girl. However, few are aware oft despite her glamorous roles and impeccable sense of style, Julie Christie always carried a quiet sadness, a childhood trauma, a feeling of desertion, and a family background characterized by deeply ingrained in her heart were facts that colonial society considered shameful. Though she avoided marriage because of her wounds, didn't have children, and kept avoiding Hollywood even when she was at the top of her game. Julie Christie, now 84, decides solitude in the countryside of England. However, concealed within that quiet is a secret, a legend who once captivated a generation, but who also harbored a personal suffering that was only apparent in those melancholy, unique eyes. Her tragedy was not deterioration or disappearance, but rather the quiet that followed world in wonder and in constant pain. Prior to exploring this tumultuous and please like shadow journey, if you have ever been a fan of Julie Christie video, in honor of a legend who eschewed the glittering lights for freedom, on April 14th, 1940, Julie Christie was born at the Shinglong Tea Estate, in Assam, India. There was a colonial tea plantation. Frank St. John Christie, her father, was a British supervisor in charge of hundreds of local employees. Rosemary Ramdin, her mother, was a painter from Wales that with an adventurous spirit. Since her birth, Julie Christie has lived between two worlds that are at odds. Her mother's artistic freedom and the rigidity of colonial authority. But there was a secret in that household. Jan was Julie Christie's half-sister. Christie was created as a result of her father's liaison with an Indian laborer. The existence of her sister was viewed as a disgrace and kept hidden in the highly discriminatory colonial society of the time. Julie Christie's upbringing in the shadow of a carefully kept secret gave her an early understanding that life was full of inconsistencies that are too hard to identify. Maybe that's why she developed a skeptical perspective on the world. She has wary eyes and never readily trusts anyone. At 6 years old, after being taken from her parents, Julie Christie was sent to England to attend school. From the blazing sun after her tea-scented childhood in Assam, she was thrown into a very different world, a chilly Catholic convent school in the countryside of England. She became used to church bells, lived with a foster family, strict surveillance, and dim hallways. At one point, Julie Christie was expelled for making lewd jokes with her peers. A minor occurrence, but one that showed her innate defiance of authority, a characteristic that would follow her throughout her life. Later on, she acknowledged that she experienced a profound sense of abandonment during this time. That sensation turned into a menacing specter, making her hesitant to get married, unwilling to start a family, and prone to stepping away from celebrity even when she was at her profession. Like she was constantly terrified of being confined again. When I was a teenager, in order to further her education and improve her French, Julie Christie was sent to Paris. Another world was opened by Paris, philosophical discussions that never end, artist cafes, and tiny galleries. At the age of 9, Julie Christie once slipped out of her boarding school and wandered around for the whole day, with a young, unidentified actor. He shared with her his desire to live many lives, by acting. Julie Christie claimed that she knew she wanted to be an actress that day, not to bear no noun, but to have freedom, to pursue different paths, to escape a world that had always felt too restrictive managed. Julie Christie decided to pursue the arts after she returned to England. She attended London's Central School of Speech and Drama, one of the most prominent schools for performance. Her natural, contemporary, and independent style made her stand out even though she wasn't the best student at performing. Julie Christie didn't perform for her teacher's approval. She performed in order to rediscover her authentic self and to feel alive. From there, a remarkable star started to emerge. Following graduation, Julie Christie, who graduated from London's Central School of Speech and Drama, started her artistic career in secret, experimenting both on stage and on TV. She was different right from the beginning. Although a lot of British actors continue to pursue theatrical exaggeration, Julie Christie opted for naturalism and subtlety, letting viewers see the person instead off beyond the role alone. She got her first TV job with the BBC in 1961. A for Andromeda is a science fiction series. Portraying a computer-generated woman, Julie Christie was so distinctive, cold, and enigmatic that many suggested the BBC retain her on a long-term basis. However, when a sequel was made, another actress played her part. The BBC had overlooked it as an opportunity to get her a contract. A choice that, although seemingly insignificant at the time, turned out to be pivotal. Julie Christie was pushed toward the movie theater after being fired, where she would be the face of a whole new generation of movies rather than just a TV actress. Julie Christie debuted on the big screen in The Fast Lady and Crooks Anonymous. 1962. They weren't highly regarded by critics and were only light comedies, but they introduced her to the cinematic language. She paid close attention to every detail, including how the camera caught light and how the smallest on-screen expression could be enlarged. She was shaped by this silent observation, distinctiveness. She didn't pretend to be noticed. She performed for the audience's belief. The real turning point occurred in 1963 when Julie Christie was selected to take over Billy Lyre's Topsy Jane actress. She was placed in more than just this role of the limelight, but also positioned her at the core of a social film movement known as kitchen sink realism, which reflected the oppression of industrial towns, the hardships of the working class, and the desire to escape. As Liz, the Julie Christie was a contemporary, free-spirited young lady prepared to leave her gloomy hometown in pursuit of a new future, more than just act out a role. She came to represent a generation of young people in Britain who were ready to break limits. The picture of Liz strolling down the street with her, while wearing a short skirt head held high, avoiding all looks, became a classic image of British film from the 1960s. John Schlesinger, the director, acknowledged that Julie wasn't playing Liz. Liz was Julie. Regards Julie Christie was a startling new face to Billy Lyre right away. Not only a cultural icon, but a promising star. As a last-minute substitute, she became the epitome of both the kitchen sink realism movement and freedom. 1965 became known in the history of film as Julie Christie's year. Julie Christie changed in a single year from two opposing forces, turned the rising star of British cinema into a worldwide legend, but equally recognizable roles. Lara Antipova in Dr. Zhivago and Diana Scott in Darling. Julie Christie transformed into Diana in Darling, a glitzy, aspirational, and intensely conflicted model. The movie revealed the hollowness beneath the glitzy exterior of London in the 1960s, a place where desire and aspirations combined. Her expressionless eyes, monotone voice, and Julie Christie transformed Diana into the symbol of the swinging women of the 1960s were brave enough to rebel and follow their instincts, but they lost in liberty. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress for the role, solidifying Eros a new cultural wave's defining face. Additionally, Julie Christie starred in one of Hollywood's best epics, Dr. Zhivago, directed by David Lean. As Lara, she represented a Russian woman drawn into the maelstrom of love and conflict, both strong and vulnerable. The combination Omar Sharif and Julie Christie's on-screen romance was so intense that multiple scenes had to be cut because they were too sensual for the era's standards. 5 Academy Awards were won by the movie that became a worldwide sensation, propelling Julie Christie to stardom outside of Britain. Julie Christie became the face of two different film worlds in one year. The quintessential European, darling Hollywood epic grandeur, Dr. Zhivago, and counterculture. This she had a unique charm due to contrast. Julie Christie was the symbol of adolescent rebellion and the eternally romantic heroine tales. Her impact was not limited to the screen. As she entered the win, Julie Christie accepted her golden statue on the Oscar stage in 1966. She wore glittering pants that she designed and made herself. She was the first woman to accept an Oscar while wearing pants. A little deed that broke the strict fashion codes of Hollywood. From head coverings to Julie Christie influenced a whole generation of young ladies with her unconventional style. Time magazine once stated, Julie Christie's wardrobe has a greater influence on fashion than the 10 best-dressed women combined. Following that apex, rather than welcoming a wave off blockbuster scripts, Julie Christie kept picking roles that were both unpredictable and difficult. She starred in 1966 Fahrenheit 451, directed by Franco Truffaut, in which she co-starred as Linda, the Clarice, the young woman who dared to challenge the paralyzed wife who was stuck in conformity refuse. She played Bathsheba Everdine in Far From Home a year later, 1967's The Madding Crowd. A powerful, self-reliant woman sought by three men, a representation that anticipated the feminism wave in film. Hotelier introduced in 1968 Julie Christie to American audiences with a nuanced performance that captures the tensions and divisions of a conflict-divided society. Julie Christie solidified her position in the early 1970s with McCabe and Mrs. Miller by Robert Altman, in which she played a cunning and intelligent brothel madam, for which she was nominated for a second Academy Award. Another high point was Don't Look Now, 1973, which came 2 years later. A realistic love scene in a psychological horror movie that was long thought to be real. Celebrated as a classic today, for decades, critics have praised Julie Christie, and her decisions consistently set her separate, guaranteeing reinvention at each stage. She didn't look for commercial work, but sought out nuanced characters that captured the inner turmoil of contemporary women. And this was exactly what made Julie Christie a social and cultural icon in addition to a movie icon that alter on its own. If Julie Christie became a movie star in the 1960s and 1970s, the years spent away from the spotlight exposed the true self. Outside of movie sets, Julie Christie didn't lead a glamorous life. She always lived as a woman. She is wary of love, doubtful of happiness, and constantly distances herself from the relationships that society expects women to have. The refusal to get married and the decision to never have children are examples of it in long-term relationships, that the intense fear that has followed Julie Christie since she was a young child is evident. The fear of confinement, the fear of losing her independence, and of suffering the same losses she had in the past. Julie Christie's eyes were half cautious and half yearning as she entered her 20s. She got to know in the early 1960s, Terence Stamp was halfway between being unknown and fame. Then, Stamp was praised as the most dangerously romantic young actor in Britain, with a marble-carved face and cold blue eyes. Julie Christie had just departed minor TV parts, not yet a celebrity, but already possessing a distinct self-sufficient air, a cool gaze that is both seductive and aloof, as though she always remained imperceptibly removed from the outside world. Why did Julie Christie choose to stay with the aura of glory surrounding Terence Stamp was not flattering. It was a unique silence. The two could spend hours together in noisy crowds without feeling the need to fill the empty space with words. For Julie Christie, who had always been afraid of attachment and stayed, that silence was a rare indication that she might let her guard down, and she was wary of love. They didn't fall in love like wildfire. It was tender and profound, akin to two lonely souls who by chance discovered one another. They discussed European film, philosophy, the pointlessness of celebrity, and their concerns about a society that is changing. Later, Terence Stamp acknowledged, July didn't require anyone to draw attention to her. She would just walk into a room and there was silence. Julie Christie, who is always wary off for the first time, She felt content and thought that someone could see through her calm exterior to the fragility that lies beneath it. Julie Christie saw her relationship with Terence Stamp as a lovely experiment that tested the viability of freedom with dedication. She never got a satisfactory response. However, that connection offered her a different kind of life, cozy, secure, and knowledgeable. As their careers began to progressively separate, she landed parts in Hollywood that revolutionized British filmmaking. They didn't pull a showy split. No treachery. Two parallel paths diverged, but there was no explosive split. When questioned years later, Terence Stamp continued to state, "I have never met anyone like Julie. No one ever made me feel as lost or confused as she did," that frequently becomes silent during conversations. As for Julie Christie, she said not much. She merely admitted that he understood me better than I did. Idea. The next man to enter Julie Christie's life after Terence Stamp wasn't an actor or a global citizen of motion pictures. He was Don Besant, a quiet, distant painter who was not well known away from the cacophony of entertainment. Around 1962, they first crossed paths when Julie Christie was only beginning her career, numerous years before Dr. Zhivago or Sweetheart. When Hollywood was still just a pipe dream, Don Besant provided Julie Christie's life without stages, which she had always desired, without the red carpet. Don Besant and Julie Christie soon moved in together in a tiny London apartment together. There were no extravagant parties back then, however, a time when Julie Christie could return home, abandon her persona as a budding actress, and just be a woman in an old reading by the window in a sweater. That's why Don Besant loved her simplicity without requiring her involvement. For an individual who had endured the trauma of desertion since as a child, Julie Christie discovered a unique sense of solace in Don Besant, a sensation that like being in a real family. They got engaged in 1965. In the same year, Julie Christie, along with Dr. Zhivago, Billy Liar, and Darling, exploded onto the global scene. When she was given to Julie Christie Oscar in Hollywood, Don Besant waited for her out of the spotlight in London. He never sought acknowledgement, never sought credit, and never attempted the man behind the star, if you will. He merely supported her by standing silently. But as Hollywood's lights brightened, so did the gap between them. Julie Christie was always away on set, dealing with the demands of celebrity and constant scrutiny from some of the world's most renowned individuals. Don Besant continued to desire the peaceful existence of a visual artist. They stopped looking in a mirror as he painted, and she acted in the same direction. The serene love that had previously united them was unable to endure the swirl that was making Julie Christie famous. In 1967, in silence, they parted ways. No resentment or scandal, just two people making a decision, various life rhythms. According to a quote from Julie Christie, of all her relationships, because he never attempted to control her and instead let her be herself, Don Besant was the closest thing to being a husband. But because of this, he did not stop her when her path called for her to go farther. If she and Terence were in love, Julie Christie received intellectual kinship from Stamp. Followed by Ash experienced a brief moment of calm and a cozy haven before being pulled into the whirlpool of Hollywood. And as his memory faded, it left behind no regret, but rather a soft silence. An uncommon period of quiet in Julie Christie's contradictory life. If Don Besant was the serene haven and Terence Stamp was the quiet kindred spirit, then Warren Beatty seemed like a storm, bringing with it both chaos and light. In 1966, Julie Christie met Warren Beatty at T-Born Free's London Royal premiere. As of that time, Warren Beatty was, after Bonnie and Clyde's explosive success, he is already one of Hollywood's most powerful leading men. He went toe with Leslie Caron, his girlfriend. But he couldn't help but stare at Julie Christie, another woman. Her naturalness and quiet pride made her stand out without the need for glitzy dresses or attempts at charm. For that moment was like lightning, Warren Beatty, not due to ostentatious beauty, but rather to the remarkable aura emanating from simplicity. However, neither of them was at that time free. Don Besant, Julie Christie's quiet, kind partner was still with her that had supported her for many years. Despite being enthralled, Warren Beatty was still with Karen Leslie. Julie Christie stayed away as a result. There was no romance in the planned meeting that friends had set up at Warren's request. Everything. Julie Christie was direct and even distant. Warren Beatty is too straightforward. Caution stood between them.
Captivated,
Line
was
neither
still
of them
with
could
Leslie
get
Caron.
across.
And
It
so,
was tunnel
Julie
several
Christie
months
kept her.
later, when Warren Beatty ended his relationship with Don Basant and Julie Christie ended hers with Leslie Caron, that they might have a different perspective on one another. Julie Christie, relieved of the burden of the past, Startetto realized that Warren Beatty was a restless soul beneath the glittering Hollywood, ambitious, nervous, and constantly looking for something more than notoriety. Additionally, Warren Beatty in turn was subdued by Julie Christie's subtle beauty, intelligence, and independence. From infinity dialogues, from interest that developed into a bond, their love genuinely started. Warren Beatty and Julie Christie eventually reunited. Walking into Eight was a passionate, freeing romance with moments that seemed indestructible. She went with him to political campaigns, red carpet events, and premieres. They appeared in 3 movies together, but their bond was never limited to the movie set. There was a time when 2 artists became friends with one another because they shared a belief in the power of film and a desire to transform the world, as well as in the basic joy of spending time together in private. During this time, Warren Beatty influenced Julie Christie's professional decisions. Rather than seeking fame in Hollywood, she started giving artistically challenging roles priority. Because of that influence, Julie Christie rejected a lot of possible blockbusters. However, their intimacy eventually reached a point where neither could make amends. Warren Beatty was so devoted to Julie Christie that he proposed to her several times and referred to her as his wife among friends. However, despite her deep attachment, Julie Christie carried within her a severe apprehension about marriage and commitment, which stems from her early years when she was taken from her parents' care. Love only made sense to her when 2 people made the decision to remain together without a marriage license. But for Warren Beatty, not getting married meant giving himself the right to love other people. Julie Christie had a deep affection for Warren Beatty, but she nearly broke when that love was put to the test. Every time she learned that Warren Beatty had dated someone else, she was torn apart. Woman. The heart that yearned to cling to him was on one side, the pride that would not accept being pushed aside on the other hand. She remained quiet. She was forgiving. However, that forgiveness kept reopening like a wound. Every night, Julie Christie turned to face herself. Too deeply hurt to let go, but too much in love to find tranquility. I love you, but I cannot bear the feeling of being shared, she said once remarked. It was a woman caught between desire and despair, and it was more than just a confession. Julie Christie ultimately made the decision to leave when love could no longer be saved. She had endured enough suffering and tears, so there should be no arguments or blame. That became the only way she could maintain some dignity, but it also marked the end of 7 years of intense love. Warren Beatty still had enough affection for her to collaborate with him on the Red's 1981 screenplay. Julie Christie rejected the female lead's proposal, not because she realized that some chapters must remain unwritten. So even though the love was gone, the role eventually went to Diane Keaton, who was nominated for an Oscar. Additionally, at the conclusion of the movie, Warren Beatty only wrote 2 words in his dedication to Jules, but he carried the weight of obsession, indicating that their memories of broken love were still intact. Warren Beatty and Julie Christie's romance did not result in marriage, nor with resentment. It paused in the middle like an incomplete ballad, leaving behind melodic and melancholic echoes. For Julie Christie, it was a relationship that not only shed light on a portion of her life, but also left her with a lingering realization that love, no matter how lovely, but it could disappear at any time. Following Warren Beatty, Julie Christie opened her heart several more times, but they weren't ferocious storms or protracted ballads that lasted for years. Instead, brief pauses on a lengthy journey. Every man she encountered left, however, no one was able to hold her for very long. Julie Christie once lived within a modest home in the English countryside. Brian Eno, a musician and producer, shared a passion for art and quiet without having to win anyone over or enter the spotlight. But that relationship, like many others, faded softly, without resentment or holding on. Jim McBride, the boisterous American director. It was too quick and chatty for Julie Christie, who is used to silence, and it only lasted was not long before they became aware of their discrepancy. Terry O'Neill. The relationship between the photographer who took her well-known portraits and her ended abruptly because he was unable to understand the quiet she required. Lou Adler, the affable producer in Hollywood, also entered her life for a short time, but she quickly withdrew to England in order to maintain her distance. Notably, Julie Christie later apologized for participating in Shampoo due to its portrayal of women, that which she felt didn't speak to her, demonstrating that she was always sane and never readily influenced by Hollywood's machinery. In hindsight, these connections were experiences rather than failures that gave Julie Christie a deeper understanding of what she really needed, not wait for a man to define her life or look for a title. Following Batty, she still loved, but clearly, and at a distance that kept her from losing herself. Julie Christie's private decisions and her on-screen personas were what made her unique. She never aspired to be, never thought, I was destined to be a mother, nor did I ever dream of becoming a wife or having kids. According to her, Julie Christie believed that a woman's purpose was not limited by social expectations, as well as whether she had the courage to be truthful with herself. She decided not to become a mother because she refused to give what she did not believe in, not because she was self-centered. Julie Christie's decision made her a silent but effective feminism advocate in a time she did not stand on podiums to declare, but she was still rife with prejudice. She demonstrated this by living a strong, independent life and defying the expectations placed on women. Sufficient. After eschewing commitment for years, Julie Christie appeared destined to never marry. In her life, love had frequently resembled a brief train ride. Rides, coming, going, leaving echoes, but never preventing her from is the reason her choice to dedicate her life to Duncan Campbell was such a challenging turning point, possibly even more difficult than leaving the limelight of Hollywood. Duncan Campbell wasn't an actor, nor did he exude the glitz and glamour of the movie industry. He was an investigative journalist from Scotland, more used to silently watching rather than acting. Julie Christie discovered the patience and steadiness she had never experienced in anyone else. No sound, no imposition. He remained silent beside her, enduring the protracted silences and the moments when she retreated. Through the silent test she unintentionally established, the distance, the denials, Duncan stayed. Julie found it difficult to trust. Christie had learned to be cautious of happiness after experiencing passionate but deeply hurting loves. She was afraid that marriage would take away her independence and that love would eventually turn into a chain once more. But Duncan all Campbell asked for was her presence, and he allowed her to be herself without ever trying to alter or pressure her. She gave up everything. The defenses were gradually loosened by that realization, which was so basic that it seemed obvious she had carried for so long. In 2007, Julie and her husband made the decision to get married. Christie was already in her 60s. There was no extravagant nuptials, no media flurry, merely a modest private ceremony. But that moment was more significant to her that it wasn't late, but the honor was greater than any honor or recognition she had ever received as a result of a lifetime of self-battling, learning to trust, to stay, to allow love to exist without meaning loss. Julie Christie discovered in Duncan Campbell not only a life partner, but also someone who demonstrated to her that marriage could be a fulfilling union based on freedom and respect, the place of peace. In retrospect, Julie Christie's romantic life was free of obnoxious scandals, painful divorces, no superficial tragedies. Hers was a much more subdued tragedy, a heartbreak that constantly feared happiness but yearned for love. Every time she turned her back on marriage, she denied herself another opportunity to lead a typical life each time she declined to become a mother to others. Julie Christie became a symbol of independence because of that decision. Despite her strength and modernity, she was also one of her generation's most lonely stars in addition to her well-known roles from the 1960s and 1970s. Julie Christie made a lasting impression with Ephraim Lara in Dr. Zago. Her presence made her a unique archetype of contemporary film, from Fiona in Away from Her to Diana in Darling. Each character she embodied a fierce inner strength concealed by an outward fragility, not just through conversation, but also through her eyes, silences, and stillness between words, something that few actors were able to accomplish. Her impact went far beyond performance. Despite the fact that Hollywood was completely open to her at the height of her career, she gave up her celebrity to live frugally, participate in environmental and social causes, and activism. Because of this conscious retreat, she became a star who refused to let the spotlight define them, who weren't restricted to red carpets, and who, for the generations of actresses who dared to prioritize their personal freedom over their careers who came after. Julie Christie proved that a woman could be a strong actress and still be adamant in her personal life. Blanchett acknowledged that Christie taught her how to use silence more than words to develop a character. Away from Her director, Sarah P.Y. said, "No one could play a woman, gradually losing her memory, as Julie did, in a way that was both proud and fragile." Christie's return after years away was marked by this film, which earned her another Oscar nomination because of her haunting and incredibly human performance. Julie Christie's legacy is not evaluated by accolades or box office receipts numbers, but by another measure, the bravery to live and make her own way. She motivated a generation of women artists should defy expectations and pursue happiness outside, lovely mother and wife. When people hear Julie Christie's name today, remember a woman who lived authentically as herself, not just a movie star. Stunning, gifted, self-reliant, and subtly lonely. And maybe itis the exact tension that made her one of the 20th century's most iconic faces. A movie star, an emblem of individuality, liberty, and unwavering determination. In her 70s, Julie Christie, who lives quietly in a small house in the Welsh countryside with her family, has virtually disappeared from the spotlight. Partner Duncan Campbell. No loud gatherings, no paparazzi, and no deluge of interviews like when she was younger. She has opted for a more leisurely cadence, attending to the reading, gardening, and occasionally participating in discussions about animal rights or the environment problems, causes to which she has dedicated decades of her life. Julie Christie no longer frequently makes appearances on screen, but whenever she consents to her turn, it is consistently in roles that are carefully selected and valued for their humanity, than for financial gain. She once said, "I don't have to make a lot of movies. No longer. I simply want to dedicate time to the things that I find genuinely meaningful." Because of her selectiveness, her name has remained respected and has never faded from public memory. In her personal life, she stays devoted to the decisions that initially caused controversy. No children, no attempt to conform to conventional family norms. For Julie Christie, growing older is a chance to finally live at her best rather than a lost own speed following a period of both glory and isolation. According to her friends, she still exudes her former charm, which includes her bright eyes, proud smile, the deliberate tone of voice, as though considering each word carefully. Some might say although Christie left Hollywood, the reality is that she never truly fit in there as a young woman. She consistently remained on the periphery, engaging but avoiding the spotlight, shining but refusing to accept the constraints of celebrity. And that decision is more obvious now than it was in her later years. Julie Christie Lives is a typical woman, happy to be alone, but still a symbol, not because of the movies she produced, but rather because of the way she has lived her life in addition to being a movie star. Julie Christie is a living example of a woman's autonomy because she once refused to become a mother when she knew it was not her destiny, turned away from marriage when it meant confinement, in Hollywood when its focus became too limited. Her life, from remarkable roles and romantic relationships, both intense and brittle, has been an ongoing quest for harmony between fame and solitude, between freedom and love. If one had to name the legacy that Julie Christie leaves behind, it's not just the Oscars or Dr. Zhivago or Darling da BAFTAs. The image of a woman who dared to go against the grain is her real legacy, who maintained her sense of self by accepting both happiness and loneliness. And for this reason, Julie Christie is still a unique icon that transcends all time periods, that never lost over time, but always available as a source of motivation for people who need to find the strength to live genuinely. The radiance of celebrity may dim. Trophies may dust accumulation, but the decision to live a genuine life, to be honest with oneself, continues to be the most lasting legacy. How about you? Have you ever encountered a crossroads where your decision went against what other people expected of you? Have you ever had the courage to let go of what seemed unavoidable simply to preserve your liberty? If Julie Christie's story inspires you to consider your own path, please share. Maybe your story will serve as a reminder to others that there is no set formula for happiness, and that having the guts to live authentically is the best present we can offer to ourselves.